Alright, gather round folks, because Uncle 3 is back for our 27th night of spooky tales. Someone asked why I haven't shared any stories from Singapore yet, a place that's actually riddled with haunted houses and some seriously intense spiritual stories. Even though Singapore has a short history, its ghost stories are truly terrifying. So a friend named James decided to share 2 of his own experiences from Singapore with Uncle 3's channel tonight. James's first story is about a demon that's been alive for hundreds of years, living right here among us. The scariest part? This terrifying demon exists right in the middle of a busy, bustling city like Singapore. Now, if you know anything about Singapore, you know it's a vibrant hub for the Chinese community. Back in the day, especially around the late 19th and early 20th centuries, places like Chinatown were bursting with wedding venues, restaurants, and eateries. You'd find tons of famous Chinese chefs there, serving up authentic, classic dishes. But James remembers that it wasn't until around 2008 that the first buffet-style restaurants started popping up. Among them was one of the first Chinese buffets, and in James's memory, that place was just incredibly delicious. The food tasted just like his Chinese homeland. Even though they've moved locations now, that restaurant is still in business and still serves up amazing food. Back in 2008, James would go there often with his family, friends, and lots of other people. But then, about a year or 2 later, he can't quite remember the exact time, James went back to the restaurant and found it closed down. There was just a sign saying it was temporarily closed, with no mention of reopening or a new address. James was really confused. First off, the place was gorgeous, built in a traditional Chinese architectural style, making it look really unique. The building itself was painted an earthy yellow. Second, there was no air conditioning inside, but it was always surprisingly cool. They only had fans, and there were tons of plants and big banana trees around that kept the whole restaurant nice and cool. So, when it closed, James was pretty upset and baffled. He genuinely loved that spot, especially since he was a huge fan of buffets. He started asking around, and eventually, he discovered a restaurant decorated exactly like the old house. But it was in a completely different spot. James went to try it a couple of times and found the taste was spot on, but it wasn't a buffet anymore. As a curious 18-year-old kid, James was full of questions, so he asked the staff. A new employee didn't know much, so they called the owner out. James was really surprised because he didn't expect the owner to be so friendly. James met the owner, an older Taiwanese man named Liu, who looked to be about 60 with a lot of gray hair. James asked him if he was the owner of the old buffet chain from that original location. Mr. Liu confirmed it, asking, "You still remember that place?" James was thrilled and said, "Yes, I remember. I ate there a lot. But I never understood why your restaurant suddenly closed." At first, Mr. Liu just said it was because business wasn't good. He claimed he went back to Taiwan to start a new business, and then, after succeeding, he brought his capital back to Singapore to open a restaurant there. However, because James had been such a frequent customer, Mr. Liu felt a connection to him, and they talked many times. Eventually, Mr. Liu told him the truth. Business was actually doing great back then. But one day, a chef died in the restaurant. The police were called, and the examination showed he died from suffocation. The strange thing was, there was no rope, no weapon, and no signs of a struggle found anywhere. In fact, there was nothing suspicious at all, yet the man died in a horrifying state. His tongue was out, his eyes were almost bulging, and there was a deep mark on his neck, just like from a tight rope. That image haunted Mr. Liu. He could never forget it. The key issue was that the case was extremely mysterious at the time. The police couldn't find a weapon, a reason, a motive, let alone a culprit. Just when it seemed like a dead end, the police searched the restaurant thoroughly, again and again. That's when they discovered a very long braid of hair shoved deep into a crevice under the kitchen cabinet. The police practically tore the kitchen apart to find it buried so deeply. This braid was incredibly long and strong. It wasn't a wig, and it had a small burnt spot on one end. Immediately, the police identified it as the murder weapon. Mr. Liu recounted that the moment he came into contact with that braid, he felt it wasn't normal. Even the coroner, forensic experts, and police felt a deep chill from it. Since Mr. Liu was the owner and directly involved in the case, he learned a shocking piece of information. When they tested the DNA on the braid, they only found the victim's DNA. As for the braid itself, they couldn't find any owner's DNA. To be precise, its DNA didn't match anyone in the restaurant, the victim's family, or even a wider range of suspects. What's more, the forensic experts confirmed that this braid was extremely old. It was only the murder weapon, not the killer's hair. The question remained, why a braid? Who would strangle someone with a braid and leave no other traces? When James asked this, Mr. Liu grimaced slightly and asked him, "Do you believe in spiritual matters?" Of course, a question like that completely caught James off guard. At his age, James had never really encountered anything supernatural, so his belief was pretty minimal. Then Mr. Liu continued, explaining that when science can't explain something, then the spiritual realm steps in. So, Mr. Liu invited a spiritual master from Taiwan to come to Singapore to investigate the situation. He recounted the story and showed the master pictures of the braid, since the police had kept the actual weapon. The spiritual master looked at the photos, walked around the restaurant, and then declared, "There's a demon here, and this demon is very, very ancient." He said the demon originated from the migration of people from the Ming Dynasty. The master explained that the restaurant's location had once been inhabited by Ming Dynasty, and they had brought this braid with them. According to ancient Chinese history, when Ming Dynasty migrated, they deeply resented the Qing Dynasty. So, whenever they captured a Qing person, they would decapitate them and cut off their braid to keep as a war trophy. This particular braid, the master said, contained the soul of the person who had been beheaded. The master speculated that these Ming migrants traveled from China to various Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia and Vietnam, and it was likely that some of them settled in Singapore. It was here, perhaps, that they lost this terrifying braid. Mr. Liu then explained that his restaurant had a strict cleaning schedule. Once a month, the restaurant would close for a thorough cleaning. The chef who died was likely cleaning that very crevice. Other cleaning staff at the time witnessed him cleaning under the cabinet. There were a lot of spider webs under the cabinet, and instead of using a broom, the chef used fire to burn them off. When he did that, he accidentally burned the braid. This act, Mr. Liu said, likely enraged the demon, which then used the braid to strangle the chef. The chef died right there on the spot. The spiritual master even said that the chef's soul is still trapped in that restaurant, enslaved by the demon. After learning the whole terrifying truth, Mr. Liu immediately gave up the restaurant lease and moved back to Taiwan because he was so scared. What's even crazier is that some of his former employees, even though the restaurant was no longer operating, would still go back there once a week to clean. They reported hearing clanking noises and the sound of a man crying every single night. After Mr. Liu left and went back to Taiwan, James noticed that the property had changed hands many times, and all the new owners he saw would perform offerings almost every single day, not just on special dates. James would often pass by that street, so he saw it firsthand. And that, my friends, concludes James's first chilling story about a 100-year-old object that held a demonic soul. Uncle 3 will be back tomorrow night, on the 28th night, to tell you another haunted object story, the tale of a demon's fangs.